Lo I would like to remind every one of us here to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation. We call it bodhicitta motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of altruistic motivation, we should participate in this Lamrim teaching on the stages of path leading to highest enlightenment by Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa. Allow me to read about page 2 from this Lamrim Chemo, the great Lamrim text, volume number 3 in the English translation of the Lamrim, page 164, to give you the blessing of oral transmission first, followed by explanation.
Geshe dabara cho me wa shiba ngusui no de wa shiba chen de wa shi kong to ba che wa to ba kong to ba ji shi kong dong la ming da ri so da la ba de zhou de ba xiu bi ben di xie yin bo de de dong zhe bi xie yang bo na ma shiba ngan ang bo na ba shiba ngan ni yu ji rang zhen yu ge rang zhen yi de ju de ma zang xie la ba ju bi xie ri ngo su ma jie zhe ju ba de xie su ma da多的这些毛主席希望你我什么以前的得了毛主席你们语言上以前是到那把得了这把西北，俺不西北我说我个让这些话呢，说着老少别让给这一年我说我不得给下一辈子到前面上做啥样语我不得让给这一年份的到了问题呢。切把人就把他让给我这把嘛，让给别真就这把呢，他也这样没写别，我不写把俺不写把的呢，让这了怎么让怎么让看来也得呢，的到怎么也把搞把呢，真的有个让个生意了，怎么说的万国报应乱国之内，怎么的这那些那么如把六儿送把的我的样就着六送别没了搞你们怎么也把我的没了你怎么也别这边这边别说那路看一样那把现对那边我把那把现对那些送把的俺一那老苏着所以我把的那让个经济出没事现对让个经济不出经济对那边那的大让个经济了什么没那些的把的 Đồ nông bùi xì bà tê ta yu nghe rang zên la sē mā mai tê yu nghe rang zên zên nāng tā la tuê tuê lü xì rì yu ngā rang zên xì tōng xì rang zē tē nā mē chē rā bē nā tā yī nā kē xì bà xīn nyā mā tē gōng bā wō tē la wā ngō mā wē nī sū chā wā sō wā la rang zên xì chū rang xīn yu mē nā tā tōng xì bē nē bā tā chī tōng bē ngō mē tē tē bē yu nghe rang zên la ngō sō mā tsē mā rā mā sō nāng yu ngā tsē mā rō sā mē la yu ngā la bā tsē mā rā sō nyāng tē rī rī yē rāng kē sīng la tsē mā rō wā ndō tō lō mō tē nē rāng kē tsē nyē mē mō nē tam ngō wō chō nō tēn bā chō bē yu tēn bā rā chō bā la nā bā rā chō bē tsē mā la rāng tsē la tsē mā rā sō wā kē jā yu nē dzun bā yin bē tē nā mā chō bē tē nā bā chō bē tsē mā la rāng rāng kē sē nyē la tsē mā rā sō mē kō tē shē shā bā rā wā lē jik tēn bē tōng yé tē kwa nē mā tōng wā sā wā rē bā mā yé tē tēn jik tēn kwa nā tsā mā nyē bē shē tē tāng tē mē bē tōng yé mā dzū bā lē shūn yé tē rū bē shē zō tē shē rāng zēn lā tsā mā yé bā wā kā bē tsā mā wā tsā kē kē mē gā bē nā tā nyē bē shē bā nām tsā mā chē gō bā mā yé nō tē tā mā yé nā mē lē shē bā nē jik tēn nā tsā mā yé tē tōng shē sōng bā mē rē tā yī bē shē bā kā yé tā mā shē lā wā tsā mā kē bē shē tā mā tsā zē lē shē bā tē yé chē rē tā tsā mā wā shē lē jī tē jī tōng tō bā rā nā bā rā chō bā yé nā shē ngō sō mā tā jē bā rā lōng tā nyē jē jī bē tsā mē nā mā shā zē bā tā mā kā jē shē tsā mā tā mā shē ngō nyē jē chō bā kā kē bē tsā mā tā shē chā tū lā tū nē shē bē tēn jē mīng kō tē tī lē tē tā jāng pēn chū tē bē rā bā jē tē bē tsā mā tā yé nā shē chā tōng shē chē tōng tā tēn jū rā shē chē tōng tā yé nā tsā mā tā tēn jū jī tsā mā tā shē chē yé bō ngō nyē jī rā mā yé nō shē sōng sō tē nā rā rā sō wē bē yā chē nā kē chū jē lē bē nē bā mē nā mā rī bē pā mē āng kē nē bā nē bā mē nā mā rī bē lē bē wāng kē āng shē lā wā sā wā nō rāng shē mē shēn tū mē shēn rāng shēn yé bē yu zēn bā rā nā mē chū bē nē tā nyē bē shēn jē lō shēn jē lō bā lā mē nō tē jī bā lē jī bā tōng sū bā nā bā nī tē tōng āng bō sē dā āng bō jiāng jē nō jiāng zāng yé āng bō lī jī shī tū lō bā rā dē āng bō lī jī rī shī tū lō bā rā dē nē bā mē āng bō gō rā yé sō gā yé jī tē jiāng jī tē nyē lē tē lā nē jī rī yé lō bā nā bā rā xiā jē tā nyē bē shī mā lā yu tā nyē bē shī bā nyē lā tē tē shī jē mā lā bā nyē sō xiā gō tā tē xiā gā shī tā tā ngā dzō tē rī shūn dzō tē rī tā kī sī ngā dzō kā rā sā gā chā kēp shī xiā tē kā xiā tē shī tā tē mā wā shī yu rī bō shū rē sō tā tē kī tā yōng pē shā mī ngē sā tā rī mā 사 가와도 다 산둥으로 가래 어디 가지 다다 부가마 하장 지나도 얘기 애니 가지 쉬었다면서 탄이도 요 리레는 샤간가 요 말이스라 다디가 아니 루루 야서 송롱 까르와 다 롱까서 까베 타들다 인 충어였을라르와 다 충어에는 다 리바다 충어유버정이는 치료백 NB 다다발라서 제도서 도다 강가 애니 코너 충을 요래 이 뒤에 강가 있는 남들도 오메 중문 볼인데 뻑까도 왔어 그니까 있는 롱루 이정 가지고 비야도 치료백 정 가지고 버려 다다가 비야 비야들 되고 말아 이 뒤에 충을 요버 지고 버려 시당 매버 지고 버려 특수 리바탄 가라 다디가 아니 다 이제 니지 수부서 샤다 레마드니 하더라 다 레마드 다 추이죠 다 저는 유는 다 유를 간제리스다 지다 tel야 이 저 소문이도 디코네를 집에 리베 애니 지수 리베 켜버리 스틱시 가서 리베 켜버리 유바 태버리 지시 이네 디코네 리베 뭐라나 타니베 세메도 타니베 세메 태고 말했어 메이드 나와도 세마 말이스 다 메이드 나와는 세메 되 롱장을 봐 다 되는 건저 유미经过 써야 돼. 애는 동다 봐 예바 타니 네가 뭐 시까 무시经过때네 애는 写的约不听门都过，他融入对吧？他融入呀，有的人都刚刚有些的，他人都得有个的有门都是可以，他那些是不人把送当是吧？
no de.
他按照他那里边接受找不着谁那些门都不的，门都不的是他写的是吧？
No.
里边接受的，里边门都不念的，对吧？念的就那看前面都是。
No.
我都里边接受都没的，里边那边都没写的，里边接受的门那有个嘛的来家子是吧？
No de.
他这里的因为他前面怎么就写的个都这点，写的就是没有的。
No.
没，这些嘛都那样开始别下面的看我了，好嘞。
Yes. So Geshe read from page 164, volume number 3 in the English translation of Lamrim Chemo, 267. And so those of you who have got the text, you can follow that. And for others who don't have the text, maybe it is beneficial to kind of remind ourselves of some of the main subpoints that we have discussed for quite a long time. Okay? So those who probably have some e-version of the book, the second sub-point that we started to discuss last week, and now we're continuing, it reads, I quote, "You cannot eradicate conventional phenomena by refuting them through investigating whether valid cognition establishes them." So that's the second main sub-point. So how did we get here, right? So it's nice to remind ourselves of some of the main arguments that have been laid out and that have been contested and refuted. Hoshang, we call Mahayan, who came to Tibet, my footnote, in the 8th century, and his followers, that particular Hoshang and his followers. So what they said is this, that when we put everything under what is called ultimate rational analysis, nothing is findable under that analysis. And based on that, the conclusion that they have made is nothing exists at all. Okay? And so that means nothing exists even conventionally, period. And so when the mathematicians argue with them, how could you say that? Nothing exists at all, And you claim that to be the viewpoint of Arya Nagarjuna, on the ultimate nature of phenomena, because that's not feasible. Right? Nagarjuna accepts things exist conventionally. So how could you say that nothing exists at all, even conventionally, because you have tested everything under the ultimate rational analysis and nothing is findable? We agree with that. Then they started to, said, what, we really don't mean nothing exists at all. Well, things do exist, but they do exist for mistaken perception, Geshe in Tibetan, right? Okay. But then the things exist for mistaken perception, right? That doesn't mean they really exist. And if that's the case, then how about the assertions that non-Buddhist schools have made, such as that there is Atma, isn't it, soul? Okay. And so they assert that it exists, from Buddhist point of view, for the mistaken perception. Okay? So why in the Pramana Vartika text, valid cognition, metaphysical text, so much arguments have been made, right, to against such positions that Atma is not feasible. Actually, Adatma is what we should assert, isn't it? So why we make so much effort? If something existing for the mistaken perception is good enough that it exists, so why we went against all that viewpoint in non-Buddhist tradition? We don't have to do that. So what you are saying is not feasible. That something exists for the mistaken conception does not, right, validate the conventional existence of things. And then, of course, they don't keep quiet, right? They're like, okay. So now I can see that you have poked into my holes in the positions. Okay, so I kind of agree with you. There's some kind of paradoxes here I made. How about your position, right? They come back, right? How do you assert that something exists? And so they label against that. If something exists from their point of view, that existence should withstand ultimate rational analysis, isn't it? If something cannot withstand ultimate rational analysis, that thing cannot exist. Okay, that's the point number one. Okay, would you agree with that? Of course, Madhyamika said, well, we do agree that nothing exists under ultimate rational analysis, but it does not mean nothing exists at all. We don't agree with that conclusion part, right? We do exist with your ultimate rational analysis applied to find out the intrinsic reality. Okay? So we have discussed that for a long time, isn't it? So we have said that, that analysis cannot be applied to conventional reality. That's only applied to intrinsic reality. And for the intrinsic reality, what you said is true, that if there were intrinsic reality, it would have to be findable under ultimate rational analysis. The fact that nothing is found under ultimate rational analysis, we do agree with you 100% on this, that there is no intrinsic reality. It does not mean there is no reality per se, because intrinsic existence, does not equal to existence, isn't it? So we try to make those distinctions, isn't it? Just as non-intrinsic existence does not equal to non-existence. So those are the distinctions we made. Okay? So we have covered that whole argument, for a while. Then we move to the next one. You said, what? Okay. So the argument, the opponent, I understand it. So you said, okay, there are valid cognitions, right, to establish existence. But they said, you know what? Buddha said it. Eyes and ears and nose are not valid cognitions, right? So there are no valid cognitions, So that's the second point, isn't it? Now we are trying to deal with that very issue. So as we started to discuss that, that eyes and ears, these, sensory perceptions are not valid with regard to ultimate nature of things, but they are only valid to their respective objects, such as visible forms and sounds and so forth. Right? So now we are going to continue with that line of reasoning.
So sung ba chang ni yu che ba di kwa ni de sa ba ga yu xian la ni en xian la ma yin ba xie xin de sa no de shi ne de me de yang de me lo so bi xi ba de da de de ya ka je da ka sa me de na ni ka di o ma ji ba ga sa nam gu ji de se mi tie ji de ga 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 li ya en ji de be da ga ba sa ma di kwa ni de sa ma yin se o de la ge ma de ji yu kan la sa ma yin se la ge ma re Rwati lagi ene ta karsa dene tanda karsa de Phuntsok thome ba ta sa di reme cha do do se wa rwa o de rwa me hi ba ene yu do no phagbe lang thome je se ne reme cha wa de cha ya ka de se na ene me hi ba ge ene so to na ene yin hi thome wa de me hi ba thome so ji se ya cha wa rwa ta do za ji ene Make Shiva Ganto Onshi, Suzuki Onshi to the Tony Tonsona, any other Lama Kali Judge, Pavelam Sea, Tom and do said Lamna Digorwa, or 2 days on Jata Shadwa, Kaji then Jashamudwa.
So we are on page 164, right on the top. And so as you can see, there is a passage quoted from Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way, Madhyamika Avatar, which reads, I quote, "Because the world is not valid in any way, the world has no critique in the context of reality," unquote. So what that really means is that our worldly or ordinary perceptions, they cannot be valid to the ultimate reality or the nature of things. They are valid with regard to their respective focus of the objects, such as visible forms and auditory sounds, but they are not valid to the final nature of everything. So that's the meaning of the passage. So somewhere the opponents, they have misinterpreted it, that whole passage where the eyes and ears are not valid, right? So there's, look, that's Buddha said. So they cannot be valid, okay? So you said if these sensory perceptions were to be valid, there would be no need for transcendental wisdom or the Arya's wisdom, right? That's their argument. Okay? So it makes no sense to say that, for example, visual consciousness, if it were to be valid with regard to the visible form, then there would be no need for the transcendental wisdom at all, because those two things are not correlated. That's not making sense. The only way that could make sense is if one were to claim that, for example, visual consciousness were to be valid with regard to ultimate reality, then there would be no need for the transcendental wisdom, isn't it? If the sensory perceptions ordinarily can perceive ultimate reality as it is, then what need is there for the Arya's wisdom, right? Why do we need to strive in the practice and cultivate and meditate? There is no need, because our eyes can see, the ears can hear, the tongue can taste. There is no need for that. That is the right interpretation of the passage. Not that if the eye consciousness were to be valid to the visible form, then there would be no need for the transcendental wisdom. That makes no sense at all. Okay. No.
Sema mayabda ene pabelon su atonye be shirsen te ndes nga tagana res te kira nga nuji rumun su nuji tanga nuji reg mundu la ra ta de ni zeba sheba ji sa ra wo ne hija ben ja la koyan de ne angbo nam dam ba sheba ngo su ni de ro ta ne chen ni do ba sheba de she hin de man de ba shego mi le sheba ji de sema ni do ta khong ji di ti de da da 링데제 다 치료 돈도 누버티 가가게 이네 먼저 옹무도 절레 나와도 저 켈링 거와 어쨌다 단단히 단 히잡에 막아야 돼 이네 무슨 나와도 저 켈라야 돼 이네 대단은 이네 수소 정신 참아도고 그래서 어디 바가야 나와도 참아만 있지 랑전 나와도 참아이나 이네 랑전 참아도고 그래서 어디 참아만 있라야 다 디테일 추니야 디 히잡 롱데 어디도 수다 간가 참아만 라도 가서 양여 디 동거에서
알아서
여디 동거 세다 디 참아만 있어야 돼 랑전 참아만 있으면 미지 지도 수다 참아만 라고 말해 어다 디테스 거 단다 랑지 메지 무슨 되게 치료도 경하게 있는 어디 나와
치료 나와도 두고 걸어다 치료 나와도 치료
치동스는 다 랑시 저 다 랑시 저 봐세요 세고 말해 어디 랑제 나서고 와 랑제 나와도 쳐보세요 와 어디 세다 랑제 나와도 쳐보세요 다 티파가 안다 시작을 지가도 와 디 어디가 세마 말이 있을까 되기도 와 디까지 다 같이 걸어서 다디 어디도 같이 던 세마 많이 라고도 없어 어디 통과로 와 어디 지도 세마 많이 라고 말했어 랑제 나와도 세마 많이 쓰고 뭐 지도 수다도 세마 많이 쓰고 말했어 어디 디데자 다야 메가나나 세마 많이 써야 돼 니카가 인송도 지도 디 더다 되게 왔다 가르가 그래서 저런 데니 히잡을 가가 메가나가 세마 많이 쓰 디카도 왔어 진짜 말이 나와도 저발 세마 많이 까르 뭐 지도 세마 많이 까요 말했다 레 도도 진데래
So at the bottom of page 164, then the opponent started to kind of lay out sort of a additional argument here. That is, based upon what has been stated in Aryadeva's 400 stanzas on the middle way, Chatukshara, Shivjaba, right? And so there is a statement again, which actually is meant to be understood as that sensory perceptions such as eyes and ears are not valid in regards to the intrinsic character of the objects. Okay? Now the opponents have understood it to mean that, look at that, in the 400 stanza they said sensory perceptions are not valid to the objects, So that means they cannot be valid. But you are claiming them to be valid with regard to their respective objects. But look at that, what the 400 stanza says is they are not valid. So again, they miss to make the distinction between, right, sensory perceptions being valid to their respective objects such as forms and auditory sounds versus sensory perceptions are not valid with regard to the intrinsic character of objects. What this means is that things appear to our sensory perceptions as intrinsically existent, right? But our perceptions are not valid to regard to these intrinsic appearances, isn't it? They appear to us as intrinsic existence, but they are not valid to that. So by refuting that our sensory perceptions are not valid to the intrinsic reality, we are not refuting that our sensory perceptions are valid or could be valid with regard to their respective objects such as forms and auditory sounds. Okay, so that distinction has to be made very clearly.
chi tangbo khana jawa da jawa chiba jo imbi teta tawi teta temba chawi chi ngusun khan yi shi ne ge gi ta ba je do me ta dire di ngusum se di kare de ngusum de ne tere si hiba maju yi la do ngusum yi no yi hiba khanda shi khan to ba de te ji ene te ji Togbad has the Togbad Chow, Togbad Jishi, Tongkan La Ming the Su number road of a shubi. The she year but the Tita J, Umbo number Shiva, and you don't send La Judi some La Jubi, Muslim Dajava Chat, she's about our Conjeta, Gundu Tanda, Dodi will look the Muslims in Tawati Madu Shiva Shawarwa, or this night Shawata, Muslim these Muslim teens. O tilan o di ta di ngusun to maju se di digmundu se o ti ka um de tan da to khaji ko ro se na da jidan ni ko na di ngusun de ye de ni chema ma yi ka ba ko do o di ma de gu de rangzen chema ka ko de ti yim ba yuzin ka de se na ka da de la do ka da de la maju yu ne rang sin ne wa chi da ne ba da ang bu shi ngusun nga ka chema je we na Sukala said, Rang singing over to that Sheja Yimbi, to that Saman Rosa, you over the Rang singing but dirt or dita, Rang you mentioned the Yadirwale. The Lobun di Cheva Joa, the Rang with that dig Rang is Ranzing to us at the Gian do Martins, any Muslim day, not that Muslim Sama Madu Shagamaris. La
Rangsen, now what the Del Matu?
No, that. That don't you do not that wrong thing to Muslim are doing Siwarwa. That thank you, Listen, Muslim Ganga Trishi Kajagra. Tikaya, that. Tanya dear Mishiva, Ombushiva number Ranzel Sama Kalashi, then and then did that Sema in Bakawa, Nitino Yunga Ranzel Rang Singila, Seman de Bagova Yela, goes in the Jumdi, Nam he. Nam Zumba song but Tim Go, said Namshi de Nova Zumba shooting song, just because no that semi and the code Zumba rigmaris, for Hill somebody were what is Zumba rigmaris. She said, no, several minutes in the Zumba shooting song it was. Oh, Tisha. Dear Lua song by Miloa can semi mango, Loa and semi Miloni, Milo and the semi thing, but the Dash on the Jibba, because the same thing Miloa said that. Namwe do the Gangali Sardo Chavan about the Milo Samashawara. Milo Samashata, she had the Karsa Milo Semi singing in Bisharos, the other tea in the Ranzella and somebody drew those. One lulu kanya number hit the neighbor goes da la karasana and show sudala saba ranze mojo shendu ranze triba nine and luares because it needs to do that tongju da tondani kagajo ro wa di lu dang de res onji na lu sudala so ngo de ranze triba mojo shendu ranze na 제다 랑 생일 세마마이 노 셰바데 도노 엉부 다데레 도노 엉부 셰바 데다 유응아 랑젠라 세마마이데 유응아 랑젠 나와데 데 르셰 데 유응아 랑 생일도 생일이 동시엔디 랑젠这边나에 셰 벤 다와니네 어지셰디 어지셰 냥디 공바워스 어디다 디셰다 다와지나 안시스나다 그런 거면 안시 찍바래 식다 저거 로기 용자 로기 샤그러와 어시다 거 이제 디어 로기 샤바네 대랑제 마도바 랑제나 아인다 이제 추셰레도 다니나 안시레스 디르와 가자 델라 ngobo마 수자라서 봐 랑제 이게 랑실 메나 대다 동시네베 동베 탐제 도 명의미 대비 유응의 랑전을 무슨 세마 마손나 유응을 세마면 로사메라 유응을 세마 마손나 대랑 생일 커서 세마를 손 유응을 세마를 손나요 디랑 생일 세만 로도도 어디 다 거기 정유 문제디 유응을 소자소다 유카레네 디라 그래서 세마 손나 ene ranzen chobale ya seman rogo dindo diogres ronju menje ta lobon de ne ranzen ji tam ngo choba demba chobi yu demba choba number jobe semala ranzen la se sema son gojang yu zumba yimbe tenon jobar ten number jobe semala la ranzen ranzen sema son megotis te yu demba chuna ine yu chama te madua she ene ko yu ranze sama do tanyi de yawala ene ko sama sona ya ene yu demba sama do maris zumba sama do yorwa o tin so ta tipji
so in this can say and rangyu menjali ya can rangi chinyin droba nama ta do drubde delia sama sona yorwa
ala sama ta no 이 처만 줬어. 답에 본지미기 본바동 그러. 본바 나와들 처만 일라고. 다
본바를 본바 나와서마다 본바랑 신이들 좀 나와도 처만 줬어.
지금
제대로 가나 아니 단다 디르와 캔 그래서 그래디 하산 글랍데 따다 디고 말로 캔 아니 랑 가서 랑제 나오려 야 처만 차되고 말로 다 랑주 메제시나
랑주 메제시나 데레다 랑제 처만 줘고
랑제 처만 다 랑신 줘발려 야 처만 줘되고 디 추 차고 말로 다다는
랑지다 랑주로 시야시나 되고 추 말와 다다 땡겨로 시와 추 랑주 메제는 마주와 다다는 가서 샤사데 다 little look yaso look che ta ga ga dong ji ba da ha sha da ngan zu rong ga ga ten sa du tin tin go
ala ta sam chi bo ja bo lu ja
ta tel video som se do sa ha sha ji de ra ngan zu rong lu ji de rong ji me ji de rong ji ba sem sa ba ni te dang ba ra o ti kha ga do ba ra
ala ta sang ma lo lo dang lo
o ti re ta ga ji ta do di thong di do di na ene rong ji me ji ge o ti du rong ji sem man du re ene te ta da ene hijabe dewe kaso be zumba yin da lua yin sia de gangale ini ngonzo onshi nga wo di jidang yul sama mai la go mar sta do se di na o yu nga rang hin sama mai o ti ka go sta khaji se di di dang go da di lo sa sama yin su do sama re mu do hijabe jo de sama mai lua yin la do as o ti dang go ro o ti re
ja so Geshe has given an explanation on the things you find on page 65 and 166 up to the third paragraph. So the gist of what is being stated here, again, we see a big passage quoted from Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas in the middle of page 165. Okay? And so that passage deals with, so what do we mean by perception or the let me see. So what do we mean by perception in this context? And the perception here is defined as a state of mind that is free of conceptuality, okay? That's free of conceptuality. In other words, it's not a conceptual state of mind, it is the non-conceptual perception that we are talking about. And so when we talk about valid perception, what we're really talking about is non-conceptual perception that is unmistaken. A non-conceptual perception that's unmistaken is a valid perception, miluwa. The Tibetan term is called miluwa, means non-deceptive or unmistaken in that sense. Okay? And so the opponents are arguing with the Prasangika Madhyamikans that you claim that the existence of things can be verified by valid cognitions, but there are no valid cognitions. Okay, that's what they're saying. And they said, look in the 400 stanzas, what is being stated is that eyes, ears, and nose, these things are not valid too, right? Are not valid. Okay? And so Prasangikas say, what that really means is that eyes, ears, and the sensory consciousnesses are not valid with regard to the reality. In this particular case means ultimate reality or ultimate nature of things. But they could be valid or unmistaken or non-deceptive with regard to their respective objects, visible forms, auditory sounds, and so forth. Okay? So that's the one, big point, right? We settle down. And then they come back and say, they said that in the 400 stanzas, they have refuted that these perceptions are valid with regard to the intrinsic character of the objects. And so therefore, they cannot be valid to their respective perceptions. Okay? But Prasangika say, that's the very point. They are not valid with regard to the intrinsic character in the objects, but they are valid with regard to the objects themselves. Okay? And that distinction has to be made. And the reason is, Prasangika say, from their point of view, our ordinary perceptions such as eye consciousness, visual perception, and auditory, they are valid with regard to sound and with regard to the forms and sound, respectively. But they are not valid with regard to the intrinsic character in the objects. That's because things appear to them as intrinsically existent, but they don't exist intrinsically. So therefore, with regard to that, these perceptions are not valid. As a matter of fact, we see the disparity between the way they appear to exist to them and the way they are. And so that distinction, has to be recognized. So one of the things I asked Geshe is because in here it seems like we are really arguing with the Hoshang and his followers in some sense, but then at the same time, sometimes we drag in all these other schools. So this one argument is also applicable to, from Prasangika's point of view, the other schools of Buddhist thought, including Saivatantika Madhyamikans and schools below, because they do accept intrinsic reality, isn't it? Okay? For them, things appear intrinsically, and our perceptions are valid with regard to that intrinsic reality, isn't it? So this argument against the Hoshang, and Hoshang came to Tibet, and the followers also applies to our own other schools of thought where they do assert intrinsic reality. Okay? From their school's point of view, our perceptions are valid with regard to that intrinsic reality. Although Prasangikas differ, they said, no, there is no intrinsic reality. So that's the kind of clarification I was trying to seek from Geshe.
시접은 다 뒤부터 그래서 애니 처마이나 될 유를 마주고 말서 뒤들에 시접은 저발은 지게 배 통에 대코나니 통화 세워 레고 마인데 되는 지든 코나나 처마니 임비셔다 Ti mi be to zimbali shejin yi de chebe she so teacher rongzel chema yin ba ka pa zam rongzel chema yin ba ka be chema za khik mu gu be na ta ni be shiba na la chema chema jirin go ba ma yin no so da de ka je da ene chema min du se ya de ene ye be kong de ma re se rongxin zhuwa sema ma yise jidan sema jida wa sema ma ka go ma re yes tirwa tinde ma ina ke kare se na ta mulu hi ba ni jidan sema yi tong ye sung bu ta hi jiao zhuwa jidan de mulu tama tong se ya zhuwa se da sema za ni me na ene mulu jidan sema tong se ya le go ma sema yo ma ba mulu sema ji ba re go wa 메데 타이베 히바 칸 탐제라 체마키 베쇼서 체마자니 메베시 체마자니 메자 지데 통화 체마이제 세야디 디그문도 어디 겨와샤도 티시 다티마 식세라 티제 체마 라 힐레 지데 이제 통도 나마조바인 히무스무다 제와다 롱다 카르사 년제 이자마 세면 남자 제바된 교육이 싫어서 제다다 태교를 세마자니면은 이 식세가 세마 해야야 그러봐 무슨 시 이 제바시 제와 그래서 이 백년제 세마시 이 이체베 세마 간지다 간지 남중을 시는 다 무슨 시 무슨 세마시 이 제바 세마시 제바 세마 능실이야 이 이제 제바다 잡아줘 가서디 그것도 저 인식으로 와. 그래서 단다디 롱드 백년제셔야 돼. 이제 이제 제바이세. 그 세마 돈다 소모 이샤와 말다. 무슨 세마 제바서 인식은 소모도 면도 와. 그래서 세마자니면은 이제 디 세마 희나 백년제 세마 희샤도 왔어요. 식세값. 자 무슨다 제바다 에넥사 롱세 어디 이제 제바시. 백년제 사마시기도 백년제 사마세다 방랑다 파미다서 이제 거기 작배제 와서 인사리 너 이제 제다 다 세마면은 세마 희샤도 왔어 다다 희자베 가서라 지대 통화 세마인지라 빌로인 송도 에는 식세 가서 세마 희샤도 저 희하다 다 세마자니면 세마 희자가 그래 용거래 다 도스가야 되샤
And so the Madhyamikins, the Prasangika Madhyamikins are, telling the opponent that you cannot, refute that valid cognitions exist. Because if you look up in some of the sources that you have quoted, for example, in Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas, there is mentioned how, worldly perceptions, among the worldly perceptions, there are valid perceptions. And it's not like every worldly perception has gone wrong or mistaken. There are valid perceptions. And also in Chandrakirti's another work called the Sixth Cell, Clear Words commentary, there are mentions of different types of valid cognitions, sema. As a matter of fact, 4 types of valid cognitions. You see that on page 167 right on the top. And let me read it and then trust the explanation given. Somewhere in the middle it says, also, this would contradict Chandrakirti's clear words where he presents direct, inferential, scriptural, and analogical valid cognitions. Yeah, so those 4 types of valid cognitions are presented in the clear words commentary. So which means there are valid cognitions, right? In the Tibetan, some of you, they want to hear the Tibetan words sometimes. So I'll use the Tibetan words. So, Musum Sama is direct valid cognitions. Okay? And Chebat Sama is the inferential valid cognitions based upon reasoning and inference, right? That's what we're talking about. And within that inferential valid cognitions, we find subcategories of valid cognitions, such as the analogical valid cognitions, Penyerjitsema in Tibetan, and scriptural valid cognition. This means in the Tibetan we call Yije Cheba, valid belief system. And that valid belief system is based upon scriptural authority, right? The validity of the scriptures. Based upon that, you can develop what are called maybe I shouldn't say belief. I should say the yiche. Yiche is like a mental approach, valid mental approach. Yiche, not yiche. The two words sounds about the same, isn't it? So yiche cheba. So that is the valid mental approach. I translate is yiche, based upon the validity of the scriptures, and then there are valid analogical perceptions. So mathematicians say, there is a clear indication that among the worldly perceptions, these valid perceptions exist, and so you have to accept them.
long tsamasne ije jewaje
Long.
ninje sne ben jerwa
Long.
de shiro sa tsama she sheja ngu ni ro ka tsama da sheja de shagbe be tenre mungo se cheta rangje chwa ka ma jil en tsama da sheja ni ka ma re te ma de tsikse le ti da kyang pindi de ne chwa je de tsama ta yue ne sheja tong de jo la sheja tong da yin tsama de jo de tsama da sheja ni ngu ni chwa ma yin she song so cheta tsama de ne sheja jo de sheja de tsama jo pindi de pindi de ne chwa de tsama yin sheja yo da sheja yin tsama ro ko de ma ji ko no be tinde tudo ge de steme de chwa ma re o ti me da cheta tire cheta tsama de sheja sha sha cheta ta da de zubali shi ji sia de ji rangzen tsama ka ma de jo tsama ka ma ta thon da ni mo de tire sha
No. So in the middle of page 167, we have a passage quoted from the clear words where there's a mention of how valid cognition, tsema, and its object, gyeltsen, object of comprehension, are mutually dependent and established, isn't it? And a perception is considered valid with regard to whatever its object is, right? So it's dependent upon its object, how it's seeing the object. That's how we can define the validity of the perception. And we know that its object exists because there is a valid perception that can verify its existence. So valid cognition and its objects establish their existence through this mutuality, right? Interdependence, kind of a system or the law, if you will. And so the big argument that has been made here is there is no intrinsic character in objects. There is no intrinsic reality. So therefore, our perceptions cannot be valid with regard to the intrinsic character in the objects. So we're refuting the validity of our perceptions with regard to the intrinsic objects, but that does not mean we are refuting the existence of valid cognitions and their objects, isn't it? So it does not equal to that. Okay.
xie song so se te no ra la ta di chu dong je ya da chu ya ge ni ji chu gi te la di ge ta ga ja re sha ra la so bi xin nang gi chu gi le be ne ba me no se de ta te chu gi le ba be se de de ta di ja go te chu gi le ba me se da ngam zo on hi le rong ze na ya de po gu chu gi se ya de dang zing gi chu gi le ro wa di ne we chang le xiao go ma da da kan ne ba me wa se ga ne ba ang wo zhou ne xiao ji wa di ne ba yi me de dang zing ne ba de xiao ma te gu chu ji da ne ba chu gi ne ba me no se ene ma ri be da ke da te gu ma le ma ri be de ba xiu ya de da me no ma ri be le be ang gi la so ba na rang xi me xi rang ji me xin rang xi ye be sun ze ma na ye chu be ne ta ni be chu ba ne xin ji lo ka sa chu ba ne ta ni be xin ji ma lo par la minute ju ba le tong zu mo gun zu de tong zu ma na ba ni de ong bu se de ong bu jiong de no jiong de a ye xi ba ong bu li xi do lo par zu o de si wa za da ka sa ne ba te gi tu gi ne ba me ba de la ta ne ba me ba ong bu po gu tu gi deng zi ne ba de ta tu be da kam di tu gi shang xie ge ma ro ba o xin ji ma lo ba se ya de da te gi tu gi me ba me xie go da tong zu ma gu ka sa tong zu ba le tong zu ma gun zu de ba 그래서 통화 좀보 나반인도 되시 지도들 다 되래 먼저 가르사 대반이 군도대 돈이 다 군도 대바텔라 에네 지델 때 샤야지다 인여로 어디 통화 좀 나반이 엄보스다 엄보 존데 노시데잖아 거르는 거 보면 이서 나와지나 소리 되다 책 수길래봐 존데들에도와
나래.
다 다직나 이스나데 땅가 지정 포바나서 저간가 데레다 너바메
나로와.
너바메베 엄보셔야 돼
No, no.
어디 너바메 엄보셔고 그랬어
No.
근데 언제는 시반에 엄볼이 지키도 로버데 셰다다 단다 그러저게 나와니나다 거르는 거보다 이들도다 에네 나와직 나와다 거르 통해 시바 두절 되게나 에네 고종래도 그랬어
No, 나래.
어디를 그랬어
No.
근데 시도 로버데 시다다
No.
다 권도 로버 거르 통해 양다고 되라와
나래.
어디서 다
No.
거르는 거보다 시로라 어디서
No.
너왜 엄보투도 송아까지 지대니 로 제 lakman jine lobat namba sha so de to no me ongbo thuk si de tang la ta de the gi tu no me ongbo thuk yung ro wa
나래.
ngo ti ji to du yo in se me to ya de si ra jide ni le din si de za la de ta tu so de jide ni le de en de ro ta de se wo ro ka sa kunzo demba la yang da kunzo demba
No.
yang da kunzo demba da lobe kunzo demba ni sha jo ro wa
나래.
어디 저들 다 양다 군서 대마스고다
No. So.
다 숭예데 드리나에 소르드도 숭예도 그래 가자 지대니 로버나버 샤셔야 된다 숭예다 가릉고 본나야 되다 지대 랑가 그 로버도 도 지대 로버나버 샤셔야 돼 지대 랑가 로버도 어야 되라 지대니 라버나버 샤스
No.
지대 랑가 또 뭐도 된다 숙달라서 랑싱 로버나도 지대 추모도 타연 요마르바
No.
어디 쓰면
So. 알레 단다 칸리 세븐 나마도 로베 군자 책을 써야 되로.
라
베나 가자 다지 당이 나마도 로베 군자.
어디 로그도 샤쇼가 가르는 거 샤쇼라
No. So we are on page 167, and especially there is a big quote from Chandakirti's commentary on the middle way, and Geshe's explanation is largely on that passage. So when we talk about whether perceptions are valid with regard to their objects, right, conventional objects that we're talking about, its validity could be harmed by other competing perceptions, okay? And how should I say? In the Buddhist text, we talk about chulchu, causes of errors, mistaken perceptions, isn't it? The causes of error can be of two kinds. One is temporary, we call it, or transient causes of errors, right? Things that temporarily can influence your perceptions, and your perceptions can go wrong. Okay? And an ultimate cause of error, right, which basically refers to the ignorance of grasping at self. Okay? So when we discuss whether perceptions are valid with regard to their objects, we have to test whether such perceptions are contradicted by or harmed by, nearby, by any other valid conventional perceptions or not. Okay? Not that the perceptions are influenced by the ignorance. Okay? Because that ignorance in this context is not considered as a cause of error or cause of mistaken perception. Okay? So bear with me as I translate the whole explanation and examples, and it might come up clearly to you. If not, you can ask the question and I will ask for the clarification. As you all know, that in Buddhism we deal with two truths, isn't it? Conventional truth, Phuntsok Tenpa in Tibetan, Samvritti Satya, and ultimate truth, Dondam Tenpa or Pramartha Satya. These are two different types of truths. Okay? And the valid cognitions that we are talking about here are with regard to, in this context at least, with regard to the conventional truth of the reality. Isn't it? It's not dealing with the ultimate nature here. And So we find among our perceptions, there are those correct perceptions or valid perceptions, and there are incorrect perceptions or mistaken perceptions. Okay? When we talk about Phuntsok, and which we always find is, I find it challenging to translate in English, the falsity or false, deceptive, right? Those are the words we could use, phenomena. The deceptive Phuntsok can be correct deceptive in the sense Phuntsok or falsity, and it could be incorrect deceptivity or falsity. I know the English word is not working here for me either, so bear with me. Lokpe Phuntsok. So example given is the correct kind of a deceptive in the sense of false. That's really not working here again. Phuntsok Demba is that provided that our eyes are good. Okay, we see when the moon shines, we only see one moon there, right? We don't see two moons. If we are seeing two moons, that would be interesting. All right. So our visual perception, seeing one moon in the sky at night, so that is correct, what we call Yangda Phuntsok, correct falsity or deception or something, right? It only sees the one moon, and there's one moon, and it is valid to do that. But due to some sickness or, I don't know, weird things happening, temporary causes, we might see two moons there, right? For some people, one moon appears as two moons. Okay? Now that perception is incorrect or invalid, right? Because there are no two moons there. Okay? And so if somebody is seeing two moons, so that cognition or perception is not valid. Why? Because it is contradicted by, right, all the valid perceptions confirming there's only one moon, isn't it? Are you with me so far? That's how validity of perception with regard to conventional reality is tested, in a sense. Okay? Now that perception of the moon may be influenced by our ignorance grasping itself, but that is not considered as a cause of error in this context, isn't it? Our perceptions may be influenced by the ultimate cause of error, which is ignorant conception of grasping at intrinsic reality. But still, our perceptions could be valid, despite the fact that the ignorance is influencing it, isn't it? So ignorance in this particular case is not considered as a cause of error, okay? But the temporary causes of error, we call telji chuju. Temporary, tel means temporary, transient. Chuju means causes of error, need to be taken into account. So therefore, maybe due to jaundice or whatever, some people might see the snow mountain as yellow to them. Okay? And that perception is, we know, incorrect and invalid because rest of the perception see the snow is white. Snow can never be yellow or green or blue, isn't it? Okay? So that the invalidity of perceiving snow as yellow is done with reference to the other perceptions which see the snow as being white. Okay? That's how we test the validity of our perceptions.
다 그래서 엄벌 내배 유능은 다 샤중이 돼야 간지 취하대 가려지 이 추기 나를 와도 치료를 율바요 추기니 요르스 그래서 다들 세발라서 버시니 이 맥주드라도 티베니 소리들 깨나요 와도 샤그라 다치도 뭐 작자서도 이니 가래 미기 신딘다 아니 저 명론의 성인들가 깬 싫어를 샤고로 그 뒤에도 명론을 주고로 어디다 지도 추기 되레스 추기를 에네 근데 요래서 이제 그러다 되도 티시네 뮤직해서 봐야 저가 아도다 유마케 가잖아요 디우신다나나 되게 요러와 다 디오디오 더 치도 닝가리 반되고 말해 되고로와 내가 추디오 비게라 잡요로와 어디래 요래스입니다 이 근데 와셔 대다다 양도 많이 버시비 줍대 라서베 지스바와다 나와다 히르다게 바 다들이 치료바게 다딱 봐도 지수세야 저다 다 간지 가세서 지왕가지면 어디서 강가데 그래서 줍당에 벨레래서 딱 주시러와 그래서 가지 지대다나시 이 줍당에 벨레야 어디 줍당에 벨레야 그래서 더 드서데 다단데 케기 주베 균내바는 샤고래
알레노
디게 간가
No.
디거는 마도 건 코도 메바 또 쇼로와
라레라레.
디셔도 이 테기 지기네 베나 샤고 주당이 맞아서 간가
No.
레베다 남정으로 디에 인식을 바래
No.
이는 면라서 미일레 봤다 면리일레 봤야디 투기 나리 봐라
라레.
니 레고와
No.
어디 디게데 제다 잡으들 가지 투기 그 남정으로 디데 다 들어간가 이 치료를 주당이 벨레야가 민지 간가 테기 투기레 샤그리스
No.
다 당지레야들 인 차고마레 에스데라
No.
모티베이션
So we're on top of page 168. There's a big passage quoted there, right on the top, which gives us plenty of examples. And the explanation given on this is maybe we should recognize there are external and internal conditions or causes of errors in our perceptions. Okay? The external causes of error in our perceptions could be, for example, seeing mirage, right? Because of certain external conditions assembling, we mistake the mirage as water because that is the external condition causing error in our perception. And there could be internal condition or cause for an error, which could be if, say, when we are dreaming, right? We could be dreaming about anything, isn't it? And so that dream can influence our perception. We are seeing all kinds of things that maybe don't exist. That could be an internal condition causing error in our perception. Or that due to medication or something, we take a poison or medication, that influences our system and we might start to see weird things, and that. And then sometimes the causes of error could be both external and internal, just like in the case of a magic show, right? And a magician can play his tricks, right? He has some, what are called pinballs or like tricks and pebbles in India, but here are other things. Then he's also using his incantation of some mantra, right? So he's also using external objects and mantra to influence our internal perceptions. So that could be a combination of both external and internal causes of error in our perceptions. And then we believe in the illusions that he creates. And extending that idea also where in certain philosophical schools of thought that if we see that self is permanent, right? So that kind of erroneous perception is again considered as due to temporary causes of error because you are influenced by a certain philosophical tenet or the tradition, isn't it? And as you think about this and learn other philosophy, you start to realize that self is impermanent. It's not permanent, isn't it? To be able to understand that, you don't have to realize emptiness per se. So before you realize emptiness, you could understand that self is impermanent, not permanent, right? So you can correct that kind of a perception. So the point here is that we should be aware that there could be external, internal causes of errors in our perceptions. And we will stop there, and we welcome your questions and observations.
Hi.
Yes.
Could Geshe just give a kind of a more general beginning level explanation of the distinction between conventional reality and ultimate reality?
Okay.
The two truths.
Okay. Da karso keng dichi karso da changpa shiram me miso ngote so chirwage di kunsop tempa segen da dandam tempa segen di yawar chena kante jila samtang go gore sa.
Ale. 다들 그저 덴바세나 다 생이도 되더라. 다들 저지 리베 니동으로 다 로브션들이 가서 인데로 다들 저지 리베 니동을 다 직조마가 데 돈도 덴바세. 타이지 리베 니동들라 이니 군도 덴바세 거다.
다이네 지단 더 코데 버르 체베나.
지단 다 되시거다. 그게 내도 타도 쉬어들래 내도 내가 그것도 통해야지다. 너도 통하면 내도 타도 레레 쉬어라레레레 열어.
라레.
다 너도 통도야 돼서 그래.
kuza tembo
kuza de bas.
no so
다 그게 돈이 두지 리발 때는 뭐 또무도 그 뒤를 가래.
no so don't no
어때다?
no because Geshe started with a technical definition, so I asked, maybe an easy explanation. We're not going to go with technicality things here. And he said, every phenomenon that we experience in our life, it has two aspects. Okay? It has a conventional aspect, and it has what we call ultimate aspect. All the things that we usually experience in everyday life, that we access and we experience, so that reality, mostly that we're accessing, is what we call conventional reality. Okay? But there are something about each of these phenomenon, some reality that is not accessible to us as an ordinary right now, unless we study and we learn the reasoning and we apply the reason and the meditation. So that kind of reality, right, exists. So ultimate reality belongs to that category. Something that is not easily accessible to us unless we study about it. How do things really exist, right? That is the ultimate reality question.
데르다다데 챙이디 어머저가 되말 우구양다 좀 보통 있어더라.
No.
근데 우구양다 양다 보통 올라서 다 돈이고도 올라서 그러와.
No.
어디 위디가 돈데 와인 나오라.
No.
다 때문에 왜이 인 좀바데 그 돈도 군도 덴바 숨라라. 때문에 타니 비시비 통야들. 인 군도 덴바 인라오다.
No. And as Geshe is referring to, certain passage in the Madhyamik Avatar or middle way text of Chandakedi, where it says that we can think in terms of two perceptions, the one that deals with conventional aspect of phenomena or reality, and the one that deals with ultimate aspect of the reality. And so the ultimate aspect, the perception that deals with ultimate reality is, essentially when we think in terms of wisdom gone beyond, or wisdom realizing emptiness, right? So that particular wisdom deals with the ultimate aspect of the phenomena. But the rest of the other perceptions pretty much deal with conventional realities or conventional aspects of the phenomena.
Question about this commentary on the clear words, actually the clear words commentary. On page 167, where it says that those are established through mutual dependence, and those he's referring to valid perceptions and objects of valid perception. So basically what he's saying is that perception is valid if the object exists. And the object exists if it's perceived by a valid perception. So, I mean, there's obvious circularity. I'm not sure if we should be troubled by that. I'm not a logician, but it's illogical. So basically, neither of them are established because of that.
Say it again one more time.
It seems to me that the conclusion would be that neither of them is established, because perception is established by existence of the object. The existence of the object is established by a valid perception. That basically means that none of them are established. Because they cannot, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why I'm saying that, but it seems to me, because there is the argument is circular.
Okay.
So it makes no sense. The argument makes no sense. Therefore, none of them are established.
So you're still in the conventional realm, right? You're not taking the ultimate.
Absolutely. Yes.
I'll go back to Geshe. That and the 6egi the Geshunji Chana ne. And it's Semata, that's Seme Dirwagan, Shejarwagan, the anything Tambachene, Karsogora, Kudubersigorwagan. And Casa Sheja, you have the Kandasako, and Sheja the Tobet Samajas and Koyors Labragan. And Sama the Sama because the Sheja in Winnerwa, Sama Sidukala. And the Korang is sometimes by Nandi, that Gyeltsen or season Korang that in the Rigual charms that the Gyeltsen Hadom was a rogan. And the Palette was an alloy of the Shooters or Ching Mare Chigles Rogan. Gyeltsen to score was a Rogan. What Samadi and Shevaji Samara kinds of could use your Yerbasum with Samar Sigur, Vesla. And you the Yervadi, Takas of the deal of the Gyeltsen or Marwagan, the Rodan Soronas.
You said that visit did it. 먼저 파르츠를 해야지라. 티치다 먼저 파르츠를 가서 용자를 와. 파르츠를 해야 돼. 두사도 이제 내 있는 그게 파르츠 파르시는 내 파르츠 그러 와. 또서 도저선 됐어요. 그 피기 팔이 랑 생일에 팔을 되나 에는 먼저 피가 바치나 다가 팔을 랑자 레고죠 레고도
라레
디네디디 팔을 해야 돼요
라레
다 피게 레서 야 쓰르 레고 말에
라레
어쨌든 수도 거 힘이 더다 되셔다
나오
뭐 또부터 힘이다
나오
뭐 대대 팔라 피게 레디 쓰르라 되요
라레
어쨌든 핀도 세야 돼 팔을 쓰르야 네 팔을 쓰지 맨날 팔을 쓰리 계정이요 말 지금 팔을 쓰리 이용하요 말
라레
듣나 있다 근데 팔 저도 가서 팔이면 통원의 릉보세야 돼 어디 간가 간저 떼어줘 하고 와
나오
너 릉동세야 되지 다 릉동을 랭을 해서 메도 수고 릉보레베 통동레베 세나 이 콜레 랭을 할 때는 통동레 통할 때는 릉보레고 또 하고 와 지단 고 릉보레 스타지 릉보레 코 통동레세야 해요 말아
라레
어디서
너 세네 따단게 세마데 세전이기 고 대화샤야디
대화차 돼서 그래
유여바 정리 참아차가 말
유쇼세요 처마세도 가르쳐 그 동자 유지유다는 그 처마하고 그래서 특히 그 처마해요 말아
라레
다 유지라 그 유바 가는 줘서 그 동기 처마하다 그 유바 줘도 그래서 어디서 왔다
so I think in the so what is relevant to that is the idea of relativity, right? And the another example Geshe has given is when we talk about here and there or this and that, right? It is only posited through a certain perspective. You are standing on this top of the hill and looking over there, you say, wow, that hill, isn't it? It's interesting. Then you move to on top of that hill, and then you don't say, well, that hill still, because now it's this hill, isn't it? Because you change your position, and so this hill becomes that hill, and that hill becomes this hill. And this is only because of the change in the perception. It's a relativity, isn't it? We are standing here, looking over there, it's there. You will go over there, so there becomes this, and this becomes that, and that's just the relativity thing. So in the same way, for us to be able to establish a perception as being valid, one of the criteria is whether that perception perceives anything, right? That is an object. If there is no object, then that perception cannot be valid at all, right? So the perception is regarded perception because it is a perceiver in regard to its object, certain object. Okay? So then we know that if it sees its object correctly, it's a valid. If it doesn't see, then it's a perception, but invalid, isn't it? So I think it's the idea of relativity, right, that plays into this, you know. Yeah.
And so a corollary of that would be that there are no, kind of in a more general sense, there are no mind-independent phenomena. There's nothing that's independent of mind.
That's right. This is the case of that. The lab carrisoner that round the river church yomar said the chagor. That's right, exactly. So in all of these things we are trying to establish, corollary point is there is no intrinsic perception, there is no intrinsic object because it is mutually asserted independent, right? The mind, yeah, mind too, yeah. That's right. The same Rangoon map, that was around the same map, yes. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, I have actually two questions,
Sure.
two different subjects. One I'll start with is on that Vilander was just talking about. For our test of the validity of our perceptions, did Geshe say that it, or did he suggest that it's a consensus that it is the snow is white because there are 99% of the people that look at the mountain and see the snow say it's white?
Okay.
Is the theory of truth somewhat
Based
of
on the consensus.
consensual?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That's
Okay, first question, okay. That did is Mona Taki share the Manzo that Sama Shank never never says your wagi. So that and Pena Kazoda. Sheba Kanshi Sama Shai the Penta the Kanrikabu Sharuan. Says that any Kanrisabu Tungaduna, Kanrikabu Zembegi, that's the Lodic Nugor wagi. In a Kanrikabu yin, but the Tami Mang Chevgura, Mangmugro, which is other is a wagi. Mangmu the any Sema Jogje Chagor Reservoir. The Mimangji, the Cabo Tungo is that the Cabo Das Leisure. The Mangme case which other rest are semi immense Joye.
표지 이로 다 들라 뭐뭐 지워 그 해도 돼야 돼. 그 다른 거 서다 시험도 연구로 뭐뭐게 차오些뭐뭐 차오 능신 통다라 고여 이로고로. 이제도 뭐뭐 차고 소지래. 뭐 용자 거르가로래 공부를 가르치는 거르가로래 세월에 쓰여 말어. 기도 때 처음 차고 들으지래.
이내야 딱고
이내야 전세 간간에 임백이 봐요 말이야.
Geshe says, in a sense, yes, that consensus among the people, is considered in defining the validity of a perception. But then, of course, it's not just consensus, because we could have consensus and we could go wrong. Okay? So, which means it's not only that there is a consensus that the snow is white, but we can go and verify it. That snow, is white. Snow is never going to be any other color, right? So there has to be something more than that. But consensus is important in defining the validity. Not that every consensus issue become a valid issue, because sometimes we go consensus and we go wrong. What was your second question?
And then the second question is the wisdom realizing emptiness. Okay, is it correct to say that that is a non-conceptual consciousness?
Can you...
the wisdom realizing emptiness, is it correct to say that that's non-conceptual consciousness?
The reason for, say it one more time,
I
missed something.
The wisdom realizing emptiness.
Yes.
Is it correct to say
it's non-conceptual?
Non-conceptual?
Okay. Oh, I see, yeah.
And that's just, then there's other questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, yeah. Monakandi niba shwe di dire ta, tanda nganzo, Tonyu Dobegi Yishe se cho Rawake. Tonyu Dobe Yishe Sidu Kanria, that di Harso Ranzo in a talk day Rawake. Tongme Shigi and Yishe Shaku or S or that.
Tonyu
Dobe Yishe Slavina.
Tonyu Dobe
Yishe.
Yishe is not Yishe, the talk about Dominica.
Wisdom realizing emptiness can be both conceptual and non-conceptual. In other words, it could have both levels. Yeah.
All right. So my question is motivated by I was reading something about it, and it said in the West is when you talk about non-conceptual wisdom realizing emptiness, is that it's translated sometimes as mystical, and that this I think it was Berzin. I should be more clear on that. But anyway, that my question is they say that is actually not what the Tibetan word is.
The mystical.
Yeah. So what could? So I'm trying to clarify that.
Okay.
They say that's a common. This person thought it was a mistake or not an incorrect term and not a good word to use. But so a lot of people think that kind of perception is mystical. And so how would you describe that more correctly?
Sure. Dadi Quran so no job tatangi tone resa ken tatanda tonyu to be yishe sing jorwa tadi ngaji injina ya wisdom realizing emptiness jorwa ken sidio kan ya tadi tokpa dida kagajata tongme gi sheba jelo kudirwa konse mistake sidio kan nganzo ina be ji garoso goro ken chugi ta ji yo marwa kesa sabudne yo marwa nam yu mi jume gi rwa sheba men de rwa ken ji ngona ji yas ji rwa inde do ji nawa shane ta tes kenza 통고 yorwa ina pebe gi sigdina li shi second ya kodin di yusa ma des rwa ken Alexander Berzin second yorwa ngama ngazo Phuntsok arshir de ge ko de sigdu sarwa cha pebe gi chigi kowa de lebe ina tongyi de 아니 이셰디 동맥에 셰바이네 와게 디지 가서 당한 좀 추억이 시부지 요마를 밖에 kansa 사부지 데네게 고된 요마를 왔사딜라
다 또이 무슨 데서 거라
또 무슨 더 비셰 라 이셰
무슨 데서 비지 권인데 데요 너무 겁네 방송 톡으로 방송 모두 부터 영어다 방송 모두 부터
이내 딱고 가르쳐 오는 중 이나 게임
딱고 무시엔서부터 데네게서 돼 말이야
나나나
그러나 검디자 다른 세라마서시 이 거들에 검 무슨 샤로 거라
나래
이게 다들 똑바 대랑 겁나 무슨 샤로 거라
The Tibetan term Geshe, as we said, Tonyu Tobe Geshe means we usually translate wisdom realizing emptiness. It can be conceptual and non-conceptual. Of course, it starts off as being conceptual in the beginning, and then through meditation processes, we try to transform it into non-conceptual. The conceptual images is as if removed, right, through the process of meditation, and so then it becomes non-conceptual wisdom. But that has to be done through meditation process. It doesn't happen naturally or like that. But it does. So the word mystical, even hard to translate in Tibetan. I think that's why maybe we don't have the meaning. It does not have the same connotation like when we talk about clairvoyances or something, right? It's not something like that. Okay, it's just a fact that you cultivate some insight into emptiness. It's a conceptual at the level. You through meditation process, right, transform it into non-conceptual. And but it's a process you go through. There's nothing in some sense mystical about it. It's not like a clairvoyant says, "I can read your mind." Now tell me, not that, Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Who are the logicians here?
Okay, sure. There Kapdelia can and the talk was a sharing or what? To share the talk about the social meaning. Yeah, who are the logicians? Yeah, behind the glass wall. Then Dinali again talk about existing with one. The concept set up as a Google, Chitanjal talk about said the
Tokyo,
and dinner talk about.
Tokyo said this word. Just the Tokyo said the judge don't Kaido. Just Tokyo said Panam Madokon, Sudu Yul Tokyo has the one.
No, son.
That on the Yundan Tokyo said that charge of this word. Repel and Javasha, then the repel Namsha of Kishim, then Fungasha about it. The two sing at the Tokyo Savata.
No, the cup there talk about the Mancheta.
Oh, Tokyo, vision Mamodoa, Tokyo, the Tibetan one. Palm
the Tibetan term of the word we use is Togewa, which I think they're translated here as logicians, and I was attempting to translate as critics here. Maybe my academic training, I don't know, works or not. What it really means, it has different meanings, the Tibetan word Togewa. And one, it has sense of like those of us who have not yet realized emptiness, so they're called Togewa. But that's not the meaning here. The meaning here is somebody, who tried to, assess something based upon reasoning, right, logic. So that's why anybody who is trying to use some logic to advance an argument or something is considered as logicians here.
Referring specifically to Dignaga and Dharmakirti.
Right. Al Dekadelia and the Robin Choglanda, the Churada, the Nekijamara was the talk of a said.
Kidos the Rebek
No.
Karsa, then the Rebek and pay 2 young Tajik, the one longer is your mother.
Yes, I mean, they in other texts could be considered logicians, but not in this context, right? We are not referring to Dignaga or, Dharmakirti or any of them. Okay, so thank you very much. If you don't have any question, or you have one more? If not, I have a prayer request. One more? Yeah. Oh, no question. Okay. Can you just show it? Yeah, I was again, I'm begging that Kidu so Dr. Tooth Pemsing again. Cotton, the one. The Tongajanarunasa. I got a prayer request here, and I hope it's the same person that I have been asked to, again, name. If not, anyway, we have 2 people to pray. Alexander Tuan Ding Pham. Is this Dr. Pham? Oh, Thut Pham, yes. Anyway, he died at a very good advanced age recently, April 28. I remember he used to come here when our Geshe was here quite regularly, and then he stopped coming first. So he passed away recently, and so please pray for him and others. Omane beme hore gyawa di nyodo da chere sewan rojo ne rowa che yamale deye sala geba sho kange lo de dimye dinde nyinda namda rasebe chenye dogo sheshe nije doga lebanze kanda sebe zunra mare mendon donge kesebe rozo kola boje yande zon roda zero nyumo nyelo leye charo dreze je mare meze donge nyuko chenye cheze radena dene daje sajut yende lunzo jeze tuyu ko chuda chuda chunye jambe yang la ye omara badana di 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 Omara baza na de zende jeje kera zeje dalu demo memba rabse ne kada tenje shunlo do lode babe na zendo lode jaze wedon bega de kesa konve chudo memba shen tenba zela ondo ji kanye jogun so on the page 21 Obeisance to my guru and protector Manjushri, who holds at his heart a scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and free us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields this sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance, you who have been pure from the beginning, who have completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri, O Marabasa Nadi. O compassionate one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Page 31. Like the sweet perfume of white lotus, born in the ocean of knowledge, nourishing honeybees, the fortunate beings, your fame pervades all directions. You are proficient and powerful in upholding the precious doctrine. To you, O Lord Sang Tenzin Wangda, respectfully I pray.
Sư lợi, bậc đại trí ngài điều phục khai chướng ngài, tựa nhật quang lan tỏa khắp mười phương, bậc thực chứng chân nghĩa màu rốt ráo, từ tim ngài bát nhã kinh thủ hộ nhiệm màu, cõi luân hồi chúng sanh thọ nghiệp báo, bị ngăn che bởi phiền não vô minh, sở hữu 60. Ngài hóa độ chúng sanh, tựa từ mẫu chăm lo cho quý tử, tiếng rồng vang ngài thức tỉnh hữu tình, thoát khỏi vòng luân hồi nghiệp chướng, tận diệt muôn vàn khổ đau cùng ách nạn, trường tử Như Lai tối thắng toàn giác, ngài an trụ nơi thập địa pháp vân, báu thân ngài trang nghiêm thanh tịnh, 112 tứ hảo Như Lai, đê đầu đảnh lễ đức văn thù sư lợi, cúi xin ngài tận diệt ám chướng vô minh. Om Arapasanadi, con khẩn cầu dưới gót sen bậc đại trí, ban pháp lực diệt phiền não vô minh, được trí sáng con thâm nhập nghĩa màu. Như diệu hương ngọt ngào từ sen trắng, đản xanh nơi trí thủ thắng đại dương, hàng thiện căn như ông mật thọ nương, hồng danh ngài khắp mười phương quảng bá. Nam mô Lốp Sang Tenzin Quang Đắc, xin cung kính trì niệm.
I have to make an announcement on May 15th, because I was checking my calendar. It's a Sunday, so you will have a break because I couldn't be here. I can't be here at two places at the same time. So I have some duty at my campus, And so you have a break, and I will be working hard there. So no teaching on May 15th. Okay, and those of you who are hooked to the Yahoo group list, you might get a message through that. So next week we have a teaching, not the week after. Guru Rana Mande Logo Niya